of 113 ranked it as the #1 problem. And if I look at the top 3, if it's in the top 3, 61% ranked no link to business strategy as one of the top 3. 61% ranked that. The second highest, and if we look down here, the second highest this way was lack of governance. And if we look across here, 43% ranked lack of governance as a...
So, it is lack of communication and feedback, 48%.
Yes, I'm just going down here. Lack of community. I'm just looking at the #1, at the #1 here.
Oh, okay.
So I see that it's 48 over here, right? So going across the same way, you're absolutely right. There's lack of communication and feedback. And also right up there, close to this, is lack of governance. Now, as somebody, I don't know if it was David, it might have been David, pointed out, problem in one area, it isn't just an isolated event. So no link to business strategic planning and budget process could be related to a lack of communication, an ivory tower approach, etc. So these are intertwined, many of them, but I just thought it was interesting that I thought this was interesting. Any comments on this? Hello, Kitty. No comments. That was very true of the federal report I reviewed. Only my cats have arrived. All right. Well, you're quiet. I thought I'd have some discussion here. But so here's some comments. I think Charlie, I think you referred to yourself as Charlie last week. I hope that was right. Okay, great. So Charlie writes, my first choice was going to be no link to business strategic planning. We did a lot of work on our EA, including policies, charters, business processes, application inventory, and infrastructure landscape. The thing we were missing was a set of overarching business goals and how our components rolled up to them, since initiatives and goals were missing from the EA. In July, we had our first ever EA workshop where we explored and captured the linkages between IT initiatives and desired business capabilities. The workshop was well received, and we'll be setting up a process to revisit business strategy on a periodic basis. So Charlie.
Yes, ma'am.
Who attended the EA workshop?
Well, you're going to laugh.
Okay.
I know you know what I'm going to say. It was all IT people.
Yeah, I am going to laugh. Okay.
But I was, you know what? Small steps. At least we had a list of business, strategies.
Good.
Some mapping done. So, that was positive, I thought.
Okay. Well, so this is great. This is really great. And we just have to get those other stakeholders there.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that because, so I'm on this new team and we are setting up / evolving the enterprise architecture practice for the whole enterprise. And I made a list of a bunch of things that I'd like to do because I'm focusing on the process and the methodology. And one of them is to just expose the list of stakeholders, right? And show that a bunch of them are not IT people so that they can kind of participate a little bit.
Right. So David, where are you?
I'm here.
You're on the business side. I know there's other people here. Marcia, are you on the business side as well?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. I'm not on the business side. I'm actually from IT, but I tend to straddle business and IT, and I was just going to ask, because it seems to be there's a tension between enterprise architecture and business architecture. And I was a business architect for a couple of years before our group was merged into enterprise architect, and I tend to have a lot of focus on the business. I tend to, my mantra is, okay, who's our business partners? Let's map out our business partners. Have we consulted our business partners? Can we form a business partner governance group? I ask those questions like all the time.
Are they sick of you?
No, actually, they tend to think I have good ideas, but
so far, huh? Well,
so far.
That's great. So you're that little voice, or I didn't mean it that way, but you're that voice saying, business, we're doing this for the business, right?
Right. Well, I mean, there's that tension, but there's also the tension about business architecture tends to move a little bit faster and be much lighter on documentation than EA, and the whole focus is, let's provide value, let's look at the strategies and our goals, let's communicate those out, let's implement those, let's plan programs according to strategies and goals and move forward. And documentation will do along the way, but it's not going to be as deep as a traditional EA documentation of like all the applications and stuff. And I found there's this big tension in my group right now between the EAs who want to document everything and write it all out, and if you write it down, it will happen, which is not really true. And the business architects who want to say, okay, here's my strategy, my goal, let's go find my business partners, let's execute.
Aha. Right. Anyone want to jump in? Anyone? Come on, let's have a discussion.
Yeah, so in federal, I can share like what mainly the observation by the audit of the government in our organization, DHS and USCIS. There's a limited involvement of the other stakeholders. That is one of the main problems identified. And second thing is not having expected all intent of EA is not complete. And the third problem identified is they don't have clear transition plans. They say like as is and future, that is the states they want. But what exactly is the transition plan? There is no clear transition plan in the previous years, which they are trying to evolve now and improving on. But this is how EA is monitored by the Government Accountability Office, and they make comments and recommendations. So during those things,
let's stick to the BA business. Thank you. Let's stick to the business architects versus the I don't know, the other architects. So just so you know that next week, Susan from Ford is a business architect, and business architecture at Ford, at least the last time I spoke with her, sits within IT, but acts rather distinctly, I think. Anyone else? Business? Is there a tension between business? Go ahead, Rajat.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rocker. I have a question for David and Marsha. So I think I heard that David was from the business side, and Marsha was formerly a business architect, and now she works in the enterprise architecture team. My question is, when you say that you have an enterprise architecture team who are focused on documenting things, in my mind, an EA typically leans towards any one of four domains, which is either business architecture, application architecture, data, or technology architecture. So if I speak for myself, I lean towards business and technology. I'm not a data guy. I'd probably go to someone else who can speak to data requirements, right? So when you say that there is a certain amount of tension between the business and the EA team, what role do these EAs really play? Do they function in, from a technology standpoint, a data standpoint? What exactly is causing that tension? Because to me, it sounds like all they're focused on is documentation, and they don't really know what they need to do. I'm sorry if that sounds
No, it's great. Go ahead, Marcia.
No, that's actually a really good question. So in our particular organization, we have data architects that do all of the data, well, do some of the data architecture, not all of the data. We don't have data architects for all of our databases. We have probably 300 and some different individual applications, and then we have like core applications and things like that. So our EA architects are very busy in acquisition of new business, like when we develop a new business or partner with somebody for something new. In handling strategic initiatives, we have several strategic initiatives going on, probably at least one per architect. They do a lot of governance and things like that. So it's not just they sit there and document, nor do they, and they're brought in by the business a lot. But I think it's just in the approach of how we actually implement the strategies. So if I was going to take an EA approach and to fix something, I might write a white paper. I might document the whole thing. I might map out all the applications and all this kind of stuff. It would take me about 6 to 9 months to get all the documents together. And then I would want to move forward in that. So if I'm a business architect, I create a map of my impacted business components. I identify the partners in that. I go in and gather support from them and say, what do you really want and what will meet your needs? I tend to ask them what their ideal situation as opposed to what can I fix today? Because if I ask them what I can fix today, I get a laundry list. Whereas if I ask them where they want to be in 3 to 5 years, I get an answer that tells me a vision and goal. So that's what I'm looking for. And then I want to implement their vision and goals. Then I go ahead and develop like a roadmap and capability model and all this kind of stuff. And I'll develop my designs, or I'll hand those off to a solution architect or somebody like that to help develop those solution sketches. Whereas an EA would go through and do all this documentation and come up with a solution to move forward and say each application has to do this to implement this goal.
Okay.
I can speak to that as well.
Go ahead,
David. This is David. Yeah, so first of all, my organization is a little different. When I said that we are an organizational network model, we are truly that. I report to the CEO of my company. I am a SAP project manager, so I'm implementing SAP for our company. For EA, for us, we don't have enterprise architects, but we practice enterprise architecture. So you're building on the last comments when we said that you basically ask the business what they want. I basically create templates that go through the requirements to say what does the business need to support. What do we need to support the business? So there's data impacts, there's business process impacts, organizational impacts, and those are all built into the templates that I provide them. The IT doesn't have a say. We tell IT what they need to support, then they come back and tell us, here's how we're going to support it. So it really starts from the business side. We create the templates that outline how things are going to be done to make sure that we've covered all the impacts, and then we execute that. Same thing from the business process side. So, we just finished documenting 76 processes with 976 requirements. And those business processes go through and say, here's what the business is going to act, here's how they're going to work. We're an SAP shop. So we go down to the detailed level and say, here's what information I need by this point, which helps define all those things around governance, making sure that my process metrics align to what my business goals are. But it's all template wise. So it all flows from the business side down. And like I said, we're able to do that because I don't have a whole lot of roadblocks. We got to kind of implement the structures and templates that we need to support that model.
And you report to the who again? The CEO?
The CEO. Yeah, we're almost $1 billion company, and I report to the CEO.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you don't have a lot of roadblocks.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than I've seen. I've been a consultant. I've probably been in about 12 companies, and this is by far the flattest place I've ever seen. So,
Anyone else? So
I would like to offer some input.
Go ahead.
So this is Tracy, and I currently work for a consulting company where we are doing MIDA assessments, the Medicaid IT architecture assessment that CMS released about 12 years ago. And so we go into state Medicaid enterprises and determine what the business information and or data and technical architectures look like and how streamlined they are in terms of what CMS is looking for. Because one of the things that they found is that for each of the different functionalities within a Medicaid program, which could have 60, 70 different programs based on whatever, or functionality needs based on what programs the state will implement, each individual program would go stand up its own system. And so they're trying to streamline those systems so that states are not duplicating efforts quite so much.
Tell us what CMS is.
Oh, sorry, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So federal agency. Okay. And they're trying to get states to streamline their Medicaid processes. And it's a business-driven initiative where we go in, talk to the business stakeholders, and then also bring in the technical components as well to ascertain where they stand within their MIDA framework. Unfortunately, though, a lot of states that I've interacted with thus far see this as just another federally mandated thing to do as a checklist, and then throws it on a shelf after we've done the assessment.
Anyone else? Thank you, Tracy. So what is so this tension between BAs and other EAs, we will, as we go through this course, and sooner than later, we will go through the different types of architects, and some were mentioned, and different companies have different roles, but there's infrastructure architect, there's solutions architect, there's business architect. What am I missing? Information or data architects. And some companies, the EA, the enterprise architect, is the person that's been there the longest. In other companies, it's a different role. I'm just gonna read that. So we will visit this, and we will also visit the tension between trying to document the heck out of everything and taking in outcome-driven approach to EA. So the traditional approach to EA is we document the current state, we build lots of models, and we document the current state, and we populate the repository, and we document the future state, and we populate that. And then we build a transition map, or what we'll call a roadmap, to get from the current to the future. That is the traditional way of doing EA. And the Bernard text gives us I chose this text because it gives us a very good foundation of this traditional view, but also hints at newer ways. He'll talk about agility and newer ways to do this. So what I have done, the way I have designed this course, was to take the Bernard text as the foundation, here's traditional EA. And then I have supplemented it with mostly Gartner readings. And here is what the vanguard companies are doing. Here's how EA can be done, and where you don't document the heck out of everything and you take a much more business oriented approach to architecture, and which Marcia and David described to us very well. And the tension between business architects and the IT related architects is, business architects are the new kids on the block. And EA was developed through IT. And so the majority of EA units are housed within IT. But with the push to business architecture, which makes perfect sense to me, that now there's this natural, there's the same kind of tension you find between the business side of the organization and the IT side of the organization. It's similar, at least to me. So these are things that we will talk about, and Scott Bittler from Gartner will be joining us in a couple of weeks, and he will give us a very good perspective on, where EA has been, and he'll and where it's going, and from Gartner's perspective. So, governance. Let's move on to governance. How are we doing on time? Okay, 8:25. So let's move on to governance. Governance. I like this. Billy wrote this. One other worst practice that we live with is the lack of governance. This one is particularly irritating because we have a formal board that has approval and oversight authority on every IT project in our organization, some of which include operational non-IT requirements. Although a perfect forum to have EA support, decision makers are not convinced of the EA's value, and we have not been able to contribute to the processes, policies, and procedures for implementing the board's decisions. Billy, do you have any war stories?
Yes, Roger. I was being defeated by my
I do that. I talk and nobody answers because I'm muted. Yeah.
So what we get is a lot of a desire to do strategic planning through this board process, and there's two passes through this board where they approve a project, and then project's alignment to whatever the strategic planning process is outcomes that we're desiring to get to in the 18 months to say 3 to 5 year window. So when we go through the first pass, there's never a desire to do anything on the left side of the equation. There's never questions about enterprise architecture layouts of how these things may flesh together. And there is a second pass, which is when you come back to get the money. Usually when we come back to get the money, that's when we see the this doesn't look like it may fit, or this could be redundant work. A lot of the questions that come up 6 months, 9 months into proving we're of approving period, if you will, before we move out, we could have answered or been working on in the process and support the board. And even though it's just a continuous cycle of this kind of gut level strategic planning that goes on by the people that are in the seats at the time, which are often transitionary because they're uniform. So they come through and they're there for a tour and they leave. And generally, as those decision makers at that 06 level, so our lowest level executive level decision makers, when they come through, by the time they understand and you shape and you begin to get some buy-in, it's time for them to rotate out. So it's a continual cycle. That's why we kind of say stuck in it. We've had some success over the last year or so, begin to break through that a little bit, but it's probably part of a conversation for another time. But that's pretty much all I had to add to the quote.
Okay, thank you. In many organizations, I was at Lowe's the other month, and Lowe's headquarters in North Carolina. And I talked to the man that is in charge of EA governance. And he said, we are working very hard not to be known as the Department of No. And so anyone that has tried to get or has been held up by governance understands the Department of No. It's not just hoops to jump through. It shouldn't be just hoops to jump through and items to check off, right?
So,
And
I'm sorry, Rosalie.
Go ahead.
This is Billy again. One specific point to this is in our particular lane that we're working in, we have to ensure compatibility and interoperability with other government militaries, mission partners, to support the commander's view, which would be the overall strategic view. As enterprise, I mean, looking at enterprises and at different levels, where we're trying to work at is really governance on IT infrastructure into our region of the world, the Middle East, that our commander supports with all the capability he needs. And the biggest one that drives us in our governance that we have problems with is the ability of standards to exchange data and information with mission partners.
Right.
And it's tricky. So that's the biggest part for us when it comes to governance that we get hung in. And it's the one place where we probably shouldn't, because we know what our other partners, what the standards are. And what's interesting is a lot of times the questions we get back through even our non-IT forums in conferences that we have, our partners say, look, we resource nationally. We want to align with what you're doing, but you have to tell us what it is that you want us to do, because we can't just continue to change the way we resource to different standards or different IT delivery systems, applications, et cetera. So we have a demand signal from our partners who are willing to just resource to what it is we want to do, and yet we can't seem to be able to always define what it is we want to do nationally, not just my organization. But that's my biggest, I guess, governance war story.
Thank you. Others have similar experience, even if you're not in the government? Anyone want to share? No one has ever had problems with governance? Perfect. Okay. Am I seeing that it's 8:30? So here we go. Lack of communication. Email. Am I pronouncing that right? Email? Email? I'm not sure. Lack of communication. So he writes, in no uncertain terms, the lack of communication and feedback is the single greatest EA fault and worst practice that has been a guest at our organization for way too long. A past history of authoritarian silos and power bases that depended on rigid hierarchical structures is only now being dissolved after an impressive run of over 20 years. I love it. I love it. This probably sounds familiar to a bunch of people. So when you make changes in organizational structure or business processes, when you change a business process, you are actually changing the power structure. So if you are trying to make sure that when Frida leaves work, and she moves on to her next assignment, that we know what's in her brain, right? And so when we instantiate that and we build processes, here's how Frida did XYZ. When we build those processes, now, we have changed the power structure. Frida were she to remain, is not as essential as she once was, because now we have embedded those processes. We have built those processes and embedded them. And so when you do that, and you're doing enterprise architecture, and you are changing the power structure as you make these changes in organizations, and people don't like that. People don't like that, and they hold on to their, the political aspects to systems and IT and EA are just very, in many organizations, can be very, very strong. And so having been in consulting and worked in a variety of companies, just watching the politics work and Penn State is no different. it's a big organization, and so it's just very political. I will stop there. Anyone have any last comments? You all ready to quit for the night? I'm going to see a bunch of yeses.
Rosalie, I'd like to see if I can take a stab at Emil's question on BA and EA. May I?
Yeah, sure.
So Emil, they are related, but EA forms, BA is a subset of EA. EA would be the overarching principle, right? BA would be one of many architectures within an enterprise. The disjoint isn't because of different terms. The disjoint is usually, in most cases, in my experience, because the solutions or the technologies are made available before a formal business architecture or business scenario gathering process has been conducted. So that causes the confusion. So typically, if you think of any enterprise, let's look at a dozen startups, right? We're all familiar with the term startups. It's a new company. They have a new concept. They are a disruptive innovator, right? They are growing, but they don't know how to. They don't have an HR department. They don't have enough technologies. They probably work out of spreadsheets, or they just have one or two really good developers who've just put together something, right? As the organization grows, they know that they need to expand, and they may have many business scenarios which they need to address. When I say business, it's not just B2B or B2C. It could be on the supplier side, on the vendor side, any of these, right? It could also mean HR. The business of hiring resources, right? Or business of working with a hiring company. So once they have these business scenarios in mind, that's when they decide that they need to have a formal enterprise architecture, which will help them identify the right solution to meet an enterprise's requirements. Therein comes the solution architecture piece. That's when you'd go and say, okay, SAP seems like a good fit. Salesforce looks like a good fit. We probably want to pick up Oracle or a HANA as for our DB requirements, right? That's when you go down solution architecture or data architecture or technology architecture. So business architecture and business scenario are usually one of the first steps within the enterprise architecture process itself. So I hope that helps answer your question. You call me Prajit. I know it's a really long name. Just think of the word project and then take out the C. You should get my name.
Thank you very much for your
No problem.
Your explanation, Prajit. So we will, and I will say that in different organizations, the term EA can actually mean what project said, and also it can be its own, it can be seen differently. And we will read about some of this, and we can talk further about it. These will become more familiar as we go through the course. Okay. Anyone else? Well, I'm going to say this was a great session tonight. I appreciate all the comments, and I appreciate you all speaking, not all of you, but a bunch of you speaking and a bunch of you texting, or chatting. So thanks, and we'll see you next week. Are the teams, you all know what your teams are, right?
Yes.
You know how to find them. There's no questions there. Okay, super. All right, well, thanks a lot. Same time, same place.
Great night.
In a week. Okay, take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Night.